I'm Blake the Fairy, and I'm wearing no makeup. You guys are probably wondering, hey Blake, it's been 9 months. Where's this video been that whole time? And the answer is, I am so passionate and get so discombobulated from fury when I've ever tried to film this video in the past that I've literally had to change the format. So instead of doing what we did last video, I'm going to be listing out different topics, different questions, and answering them. But before I get into that, I'm just going to establish what I established in the previous video. Why do these stories matter? The way that we treat these stories and characters reflects how we treat people in society, or at least our mentality towards people in society. And judging by the way that we treat this character, yeah, our mentality towards people who've been abused, not great. There tends to be a lot of victim blaming with this character in particular, I have noticed. That being said, let's get into this. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, before I start asking these questions, first I need to establish that Cinderella is in fact being abused in this story. Technically, so is Snow White. I think I mentioned that before. I don't quite remember. But we must acknowledge the fact that Cinderella is in fact being abused in that story. They straight up say that she's being abused and they show abuse on the screen. It is not an argument. Watch the film. Alrighty then, now that we got that established, first question. If Cinderella's circumstances are so bad, and if she's being so mistreated, then why doesn't she defend herself, i.e. why doesn't she fight back? First off, real quick, I grew up in a household where I was taught how to defend myself. I was taught how to throw a punch, I was taken to self-defense classes, and I was taken to martial arts classes as a child because my parents wanted to make sure that I knew how to defend myself. Cinderella did not get any such luxury. There's a car coming. Anyway, Cinderella did not get any such luxury. So how the heck is she supposed to know how to defend herself? That's the first point. Knowledge is power, and she does not have that knowledge. Second thing, she's been abused ever since she was a child. And I've never been abused, just full disclaimer, but everyone who I've talked to who's been abused since childhood says that when they face a situation similar to the situations they faced as an abused child, mentally they go back to being that child. Mentally they often feel like that same helpless little girl or boy. Emotionally, I mean. And that makes it even more unfair. I feel like people who ask this question aren't acknowledging the fact and how dangerous fighting back is for Cinderella. She's outnumbered 3-1. I mean, think about that. Even if she were to somehow physically fight back, it could get her killed, frankly. Or at least seriously injured, and probably has in the past. Her survival strategy is, even though maybe flawed in the eyes of some, is all she knows, and it actually is working. As unfortunate as that is. Which is a good thing that she has a happy ending. Am I right? Second question. If Cinderella's circumstances are so bad, then why doesn't she just leave? I hear people ask this question a lot. My answer to this? Where the heck is she supposed to go? I mean, there's only two options that I can see. It's not like you've ever heard of any other family that Cinderella's had. It's not like that there are any shelters for abused women that Cinderella would have heard of. The only two places that she possibly could have heard of are going to the streets or poorhouse. And to those who think, well, why doesn't she just get another job? She could just easily get another job. She has the skills. Even though this movie doesn't have a specific era in time, it clearly takes inspiration from Victorian times. Which again, not many, if any, shelters for women being abused, and it's near impossible to get a job with no family to speak of or any references. So she's kind of stuck. She could end up in the streets, which is dangerous. I mean, put two and two together. She's a young, attractive lady on the streets by herself with nothing but the clothes on her back and the charisma. bad situation. Even though her current situation is horrible and unacceptable, it is better, more predictable, and safer than it would be out in the world on her own. Now, one could also argue, this is just something I could think of in my head, that her animal friends could protect her, and that they have and protected her in the movie. But not to be too dark, but what is a mouse supposed to do against a 6-foot assailant? Moving on. If her stepmother is so evil and all of this is so dangerous, then why risk going to the ball at all? Why would she even ask? Why would she want to go to the ball if that's only going to anger her stepmother and stepsisters? My response to this is mostly speculation, I'm going to be completely honest, but it's thought through speculation, so I ask that you continue to listen, please. The first thing that popped through my head is, before I get into that, let me just establish, if you've been abused, there is no reason why you've been abused other than your abusers are horrible, horrible people and probably deserve to die in a fire. Maybe. Probably, yeah. I did not put that well. But my point is, being abused is not, nor is it ever, your fault. Let me just make that very, very clear. That being said, the reason why Cinderella is being abused is because she is beautiful, she's graceful, she's kind, and compassionate, and charming, and people just like being around her. I don't think it ever once occurred to her that that could be the reason why her stepfamily has such contempt for her. I don't think she's not self-absorbed. In fact, she's the opposite. She's selfless, not selfish. So why would it even occur to her that her stepfamily might be acting out of jealousy or fear that she would one-up them? It just isn't in her character to think along those lines. So why would she think, and on top of that, her motivations for going to the ball are clearly different. Now this isn't speculation. It is her stepfamily that's obsessed with marrying the prince, not Cinderella herself. Her motivations are completely different. She's not interested in the prince. She's interested in having a good time. She's interested in partying. That's all. So why on earth would her stepfamily possibly have against her going to the ball, especially when on top of all of those reasons, it's kind of the law. I mean, it's by royal command that every young single maiden needs to go to this ball. So her stepfamily would be breaking the law. Basically, all these factors combined, Cinderella probably assumed that it was safe. Unfortunately, she was wrong. Because she's human, and, I mean, everyone makes mistakes. Does that make her a bad character? Goodness, no. Which leads me to my next thing, which bothers the heck out of me. Doesn't Cinderella teach you that you need a man to save you? The prince, and I cannot emphasize this enough, has very, very little to do with Cinderella's actual rescue. Now, if we exclude Cinderella herself, who, keep in mind, again, took the initiative to attempt to do all these chores, to ask going to the ball in the first place, who actually makes the choice to go to the ball, we exclude her from this narrative. The prince still didn't save her. Technically, it was her animal friends who attempted to save her first, and then the second coolest character in this film, the fairy godmother, who I am very much like. Like, oh my goodness, I'm almost exactly like the fairy godmother sometimes. And who is one of the best characters ever in this film. Anyways. But the fact that the fairy godmother is excluded from this narrative to the extent that she is bothers the heck out of me and shows exactly how sexist our society actually is. The mentality that this movie is about a man saving a princess rather than a fairy godmother saving a princess. It just bothers me. The fairy godmother plays such an important role. Cinderella would not be able to go to the ball at all if it weren't for the fairy godmother. Or if she did go to the ball, she'd be going to the ball in rags. The fairy godmother plays such an integral role, and yet she is shunted to the background entirely. She's not acknowledged. The real hero of this story, the one who actually saved Cinderella, goes completely unacknowledged, and my belief is it's because she's not the prince. Or Cinderella herself. There's nothing wrong with being rescued. There's nothing wrong with being saved sometimes. It is human nature to have to rely on each other. Being completely independent is unrealistic and unnatural for us humans, actually. This movie isn't about a man saving a woman. This movie is about people saving people. Or animal friends saving human friends. My point being, if people in our society don't acknowledge the real heroes of this story, that is not on the story's fault, because the story does put plenty of emphasis on the fairy godmother. The movie does put plenty of emphasis on the fairy godmother. It is our society that has decided that the fairy godmother gets shunted to the background. So no, this movie does not teach that you need a man to save you. This movie teaches that we need to save each other. It's not the movie's fault that we just haven't acknowledged this. That got a little heated. I apologize. Doesn't Cinderella... Last question. Doesn't Cinderella teach the flawed idea of love at first sight and perpetuate the idea of marrying a man you just met? Now, this is also very much speculation and very much dependent on my own interpretation of the film. First off, if this is something that bothers you about this film, you are free to acknowledge it for what it is. It is a movie. Love at first sight actually is not real. My interpretation of this is that love at first sight, the love at first sight that happens in this film isn't actually romantic love. I very much interpret it, and I have interpreted it ever since I was a child, that it was just general human decency. She didn't go to the ball to marry the prince, as I have already stated. She went to the ball to have a good time. When she encountered the prince, she didn't even know who he was. All she knew is that this was a decent human being who was treating her with respect and kindness, and I doubt she has been exposed to very much of that in her life. With the exception of her animal friends. Another human being was looking at her like a person. Another human being was dancing with her, was being a gentleman, was being kind, and was concerned with her. I mean, has she ever encountered that before, do you think? Not since her father was alive, I can tell you that much. So, yes, it probably was intended as love at first sight, but honestly, I like to interpret it as human compassion at first sight. The song This Is Love could very much be this is love, as in this is what human generosity feels like. This is what it feels like to have another human being acknowledge you as a human being. Yes, Cinderella marries a man she just met. Now, there are a lot of people who have problems with this, but for this specific scenario, with all the factors combined, it's actually a really good move on Cinderella's part. The thing is about Cinderella is she's in an abusive situation with plenty of abusive people, and she has good chance that she'll stay stuck like this forever. She discovers that the man who wants to marry her, who's also a decent person, is also a prince, someone with power, someone who can protect her, someone who can give her power to protect other people. I would marry him too, frankly. Just saying, it's actually a really good move for this specific scenario. And again, if you want to make sure your children don't grow up marrying random men, maybe explain to them that this is like this scenario specifically and not any other. Usually this isn't really a good idea. And also, plenty of cultures in today's society marry each other after they just met, or have arranged marriages. There's nothing wrong with marrying someone you just met as long as the reasons are good. And as long as it is consensual. I also would argue that it's consensual. So, what are my concluding thoughts on this film? This is a good movie. This is a movie about a survivor. This is a movie about a feminine character who survives a terrible situation, who escapes. This is about women protecting other women. This is about friends protecting friends. This is about not letting your past define you, and yet it is seen as nothing more than a fairy tale about some princess who, by happenstance, finds some prince and then falls in love and gets married immediately. We're insulting this movie by putting a false narrative on it. It is frankly really upsetting for me. And frankly, I want that to change. I have friends in real life who have been abused. I have friends who have stories similar to this one, who started off with maybe nothing or in a bad situation and somehow managed to find a happy ending. And I feel like that when we put down this character, when we chalk this character up as nothing more than a dumb fairy tale, as a bad influence on girls, then we're doing a disservice to those people. We're doing a disservice to people I care about. And that's one of the reasons I get so passionate about this film, is because the way we treat it is unfair. And the way we treat people who have been abused is unfair. We need to change our mentality towards this film. The only crime I can really pin on Cinderella is a lack of resources, a lack of knowledge, and the fact that she's a traditionally feminine character, which I'm also, in a lot of ways, traditionally feminine. She cooks, she cleans, she's kind, she's gentle. We don't put enough emphasis on the importance of gentleness and humility. In today's society, we constantly talk about needing to be the best or needing to be tough. And it's true, we do need to be tough, but not at the cost of being kind and gentle to our fellow humans, or animals, or nature, or basically anything that's alive. Why would we often preach toughness and resilience at the cost of a tender soul, at the cost of being compassionate. And we shouldn't. So, those are my final thoughts. This is an excellent character. This is a character that has influenced a lot of my behavior in my lifetime. The best parts of my behavior often simulate this character. She's a good example from young girls, and an even better example for young boys, I dare say. We need to acknowledge that in our society. Thank you for listening. I can't believe I finally did it. I finished the video. Yay!